Okay, today we're going to graph systems of inequalities. The difference between a system of inequalities and a system of equalities is that only that it's got a greater than or equal to or less than or equal to sign after the y, as opposed to just an equal sign. So if you need a review for how to graph a line or how to graph a system of equalities, go ahead and watch one of the previous videos in this playlist. Otherwise, I'm just going to kind of continue with a very quick review of graphing a line, and we'll start with this first inequality here. Our first inequality is y is greater than 1 over 2x plus 1. The plus 1 there is my starting point, or my y-intercept. So I take this plus 1, and I'm going to put a dot right at the positive 1 on the y-axis. From there, I'm going to go up 1, right 2. Now, I know I'm going up and right because I do not have any negative numbers or negative signs in this slope. So this slope is positive. So I'm going to go up 1, right 2, up 1, right 2, up 1, right 2, and continue the pattern. Again, my pattern started on my y-intercept. I'm going to continue the pattern now in the opposite direction. Again, the opposite of up and right is down and left. So I'm going to go down 1, left 2, down 1, left 2, and continue that rhythm or that pattern, that slope until I reach the end. Now I have, basically the dots to guide my path. Now, if you notice up here, it says greater thans or less thans are going to be identified with a dashed line. This is going to become very important when determining some potential answers to your system of inequalities. So if this is greater than, not greater than or equal to, I'm going to put dashes in here to connect the dots, so to speak. Okay, so you'll see that there's some spaces, some gaps. All right. Regardless, I still have the line, so to speak, that I wanted to put in there. Now I'm going to move on to the second of my inequality lines, and it's the one down here. It starts at positive 4. Again, that's the y-intercept, the positive 4. So I'm going to come to the positive 4 on the y-axis and put a dot. Now my slope here is negative x. Remember, that's the same as saying negative 1x if you are someone who needs that number there. And also, it's the same thing as saying negative 1 over 1x. Okay, you can always put a 1 underneath a number to make it a fraction, and that helps a lot of times with slopes. So if I'm at my starting point of positive 4, and I've got my slope of negative 1, that means I'm going down 1. So I have negative 1, right 1. Negative 1, right 1. Down 1, right 1. That's my pattern. That's my slope. That's my rhythm. Down 1, right 1. I'm going to continue that basically the whole way, especially for these systems of inequalities. Now, again, remember, I want to do the same thing going backwards. So the opposite of down and right will be up and left. I'm going to go ahead and just put the up and left. Up 1, left 1. Up 1, left 1. I've got that pattern now put into the graph. The final thing here on this step is to determine if it's a dashed or a solid line. Well, in this case, my equation says less than or equal to. There's a line underneath that sign. Therefore, I'm going to make this a solid line. Okay, so this line will be solid. Okay. So that's the first step of graphing inequalities. It's basically just graphing lines, two lines, one of which is solid in this case, one of which is dashed in this case. Now, your inequality may be two dashed lines, it may be two solid lines, or it may be 1 and 1. The way you tell is whether or not the symbol after the y is greater than or less than, or greater than or equal to, or less than or equal to. All right, step 2. As you can see, I've got the 2 lines in here. What I kind of went ahead and did is add 4 numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you'll see that the reason that they were added that way is so that you can kind of look and say, okay, this is one region here. That's one area. This is a second area. This whole area in here. This is a third region, and this is a fourth region. Okay, and it's all based on how these 2 lines are breaking this up. So the way what we're going to do now is kind of do a little trick to use as a tool to help us figure out answers to the systems of inequalities. So all we're going to do is take a look at our first line. Now in this case, our first line was this dashed line that started at positive 1 and had the slope of 1 over 2. So for this line, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put my my pen or my marker or my pencil, whatever I have, I'm going to go ahead and put that on that line. I'm going to switch colors here. So I'm going to put that on this line right here. Just put it right there. Now, if it's greater than, I'm going to just push up. So this happens to be a line that's greater than, so I'm just going to go straight up with it. Put my marker on the line, go straight up with it. My marker on the line, go straight up with it. This doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be perfect. Again, this is a tool that you're using to help you determine which area is going to be the area we're going to look at for correct answers. So I've shaded above the first line. Now what I'm going to go ahead and do is go in there and I'm going to shade basically above or below the second line. Well, my second line says less than or equal to, so less than. So I'm going to put my marker on this line and I'm going to push down because it's less than. Okay? Just pushing down because it's less than. All along that line, I just put my pen on that line and I push down because the statement says less than or equal to. Okay, I'm just going to come through and fill in this area. Now, what we're looking for is the one out of the 4 areas that both are shaded. And now that we've done that, we can very easily see that this area, which I labeled as 1, you can label as grape or apple, or you could do grape, orange, apple, banana. You can do A, B, C, D. You can label whatever you want. Regardless, they're labeled. So this area here is labeled as 1. Again, that's not super important except for me to show you. But the point is that both that area is shaded by both. So for both lines, when I went greater than or less than or equal to, I landed in this region. Okay. So why is that tool important? Well, it's because when I come here now, I'm just going to kind of outline that area that I identified. All we're looking to do with these systems of inequalities is we are going to look inside the region that we identified as correct. The other 3 areas will result in incorrect answers. So I'll show you a couple quick that would satisfy this as a solution. So a solution to this system of inequality would be anything that lands in here. So if I have a dot right here, that point happens to be -5, +3. Because that's inside this region that I identified, this counts as a correct answer. Another one, if I come back here, go, let's say all the way to -7, -1. Right there, I've got a point. Again, it could be anything in here. Right there, -7, -1 is inside my area. It's a correct answer. Anything in these other areas, that, anything over here is an incorrect answer. So if I come to this point right here and label it 7, that's 7, +2, that's outside this area, that is incorrect. Anything that falls outside there is an incorrect answer. Now, I'm going to go through and just want to show you something. If we remember, this line, if you can still see, is a dashed line. I'm just going to go through and erase a little bit here. Okay, just so you can see something. But this is still a dashed line. So if my answer, if the, a point that I'm looking at happens to fall directly on this dashed line, you can see this point right here, which is -4, -1, is a point directly on this dashed line. This is going to result in an answer that is incorrect. That is not an answer to this system of inequalities. Okay. Remember, the greater than or less than without the equal sign with it means that you have to have an answer that is bigger or smaller than that. If it falls on the line that is dashed, it is not correct. However, if it falls on a line that is solid, let's say right here, -1, +5, then you have a correct answer. Okay, because again, that solid line indicates that you are it's less than or equal to, or greater than or equal to. So again, really just to break it down, 3 simple steps. It's graph both inequalities the same way you would a line. So you're graphing the lines that are given to you. You are shading based on the greater than or equal to signs, just to give yourself a tool to identify the region you're going to be working with, the region, the one of 4 regions that is correct. And then you're just going to go through and you're going to be able to determine, once you've identified that region, you can determine what are correct answers and what are incorrect answers to the system of inequalities.